As Ada stood in the kitchen, washing dishes and waiting for the simmering pot of stew to finish, she hummed her favourite song softly to herself. The gentle rhythm of her voice seemed to soothe the otherwise quiet evening. The house was eerily still, the only sound being the clattering of dishes and the bubbling of the pot. Just as she reached for another plate, Ada froze. A voice, soft but clear, called her name. She paused, her hand suspended in midair, and shook her head, dismissing it as her imagination. The voice returned, this time louder and more urgent. "I know what they did," the voice whispered in a low, mournful sound that sent a shiver down Ada's spine. "I know what they did to all the girls who worked for them. And that's why they killed me." Ada's heart raced as the air in the kitchen turned cold. Her hands, slick with soapy water, trembled. It felt as if the temperature had dropped in an instant, and an invisible weight pressed down on her chest. She stumbled back from the sink, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her mind screamed at her to run, but she couldn't move her legs. Finally, as fear overtook her, Ada dashed out of the kitchen, her footsteps loud in the quiet house. She rushed into the garden, gasping for air, where she found the gardener, Mr. Sam, quietly tending to the flowers. Relief washed over her, and she hurried to his side. She stammered for a while before being able to put her words together. "Mr. Sam, I heard something. Or was it someone talking to me in the kitchen? Yes, it's a voice, and it said horrible things. About the girls who worked here before. And how they killed her." The old man gave her a skeptical look. He adjusted his sun hat, wiping his hands on his overalls. He touched Ada on the neck to be sure that she wasn't sick or running temperature. Then he placed his hands on her shoulder. "Ada, my dear, you've been working too hard," he said dismissively, turning back to his work. "It's just your mind playing tricks on you. Besides, this house is old and it makes strange noises." Ada wanted to protest, to plead with him to listen, but she could see there was no need convincing him. His dismissal stung, but there was nothing she could do about it. She knows how hard it would be for people to believe her. So, she forced herself to return to the kitchen, knowing the food might get burnt. As she went back into the kitchen, the cold air and the strange feeling she had before remained, and it began to feel like something or someone is warning her. Ada stood at the entrance, scared of entering the kitchen. But when she checked the time and found out that her boss would be back any time, she hurried through her tasks, refusing to stay in the room a second longer than necessary. She retired to her bed that night, unsure of what to believe. Mr. Sam's words kept echoing in her ears as she laid on the bed that cold night. But she came to a conclusion that she would say the same if she was in Mr. Sam's shoes. Days passed, but the strange occurrences didn't stop. Ada became very worried as strange occurrences kept happening around the house. One day, Ada woke early, ready to begin her chores. Yet when she entered the kitchen, she found the dishes already washed and neatly stacked, as though someone had done the work in the dead of night. A chill crawled up her spine. She stared at the spotless sink, her pulse quickening. She went to the toilet and, surprisingly, everything was sparkling clean. Ada also checked the compound and she found it all swept and clean. As she stood inside the compound wondering what was happening, a strange shadow waved at her from inside the garden. The hairs at the back of her hair stood as she remained stuck at a point. She tried to move but couldn't as the ghostly figure kept staring and smiling at her. The ghostly figure moved close to her and whispered in her ears, "I told you. I am real. I worked here before. If you don't help me, they will kill you too. I need you to help me. I'm a friend." Ada kept her eyes shut all these while the ghost talked. She almost peed on her pants. She was jolted back to reality when Mrs. Bellow's first daughter touched her on the shoulders, telling her that her attention was needed. Mrs. Bellow had sent for Ada because she needed her bedroom cleaned and her closet arranged. "I want you to clean my room and put my closet in order like I taught you. You remember, right? No mistakes. Mrs. Bellow has an early appointment at her office and she has to be out of the house very early to avoid traffic and meet up with the meeting." Ada stared at Mrs. Bello like she'd seen a ghost. She wondered why a very beautiful and kind woman like Mrs. Bello would want to kill her. She is totally confused and doesn't know what to believe. Mrs. Bello had to snap her fingers to bring her back to reality. "What are you thinking?" Mrs. Bello asked, surprised. I'm very sorry, Ma'am," Ada stammered. Mrs. Bello repeated her instructions and Ada nodded her head, showing she understands the assignment. Ada went to the room and folded all the clothes. She also cleaned and mopped the floor until it was sparkling clean. She went back to bed that morning as she had little to do. But she had a very weird dream. She saw Mr. Bello holding a girl by her two hands and Mrs. Bello using a small knife to slit her throat. The girl screamed and Ada woke up, sweating profusely. Ada sat on her bed, wondering what could be happening. The dream felt so real that she thought she was the one being held and screaming. She recalled how she had to take up the job because she couldn't pay her tuition after gaining admission into the university. She intended to work for the Bellows due to the high salary and other packages attached to the job. She thought her job search was over, but this wasn't what she bargained for. She wanted a place where she could work and still go to school, and the Bellows accepted, knowing her condition. They also placed her parents on a monthly salary after meeting them and seeing their terrible living condition. But why would they do all of these if their intention was to use me for ritual? She asked no one in particular as she was thinking aloud. No matter how hard Ada thought about it, she always came to the conclusion that the Bellos would gain nothing from killing her for ritual because they have everything anyone could ask for. But then, a thought occurred to her. Since the Bellos would come back by evening, she decided to search their rooms to see if there's any fetish items or anything beyond the ordinary. By the time she reached Mrs. Bellos' bedroom to fold the laundry, her unease had only grown. The clothes she had folded neatly the day before were now scattered across the floor in a big mess. Ada's hands trembled as she picked them up, trying to ignore the feeling that she was being watched. The voice returned, faint but unmistakable. "You can't run from the truth," it whispered. "You can't continue to ignore me." Ada pretended like she didn't hear anything. Her hands trembled as she searched the entire room, hoping to find something to make her believe the ghost. "You're searching the wrong place," the voice said, this time in an angry tone. Frightened but determined, Ada shoved her earphones into her ears, blasting music in a desperate attempt to block out the voice. She forced herself to focus, folding clothes as quickly as possible. But then, a cold hand brushed against her shoulder, sending a wave of terror through her. Ada ripped the earphones from her ears and spun around. "Enough!" she shouted into the empty room. "Show yourself! You've been haunting me for days. Why? What do you want? The people you've been trying so hard to paint bad actually gave me a roof over my head and pay me and my family very well for working here. Why would they want to hurt me?" The room remained silent, the shadows unmoving. But later that night, as Ada lay in bed, she felt an icy presence enter her room. The darkness seemed to pulse with energy, and from the corner of her eye, she saw the faint outline of a figure. A ghostly woman, her features barely visible in the dim light. Ada's breath caught in her throat as the woman's voice filled the room. "I was like you," the ghost said softly. "I worked for them, just as you do now. But they aren't who they seem. They're monsters. They also did a lot of good things for my family, and they even paid them heavily when I went missing. This is who they are. They prey on the vulnerable and buy their love with money. When I worked here, I loved the Bellows so much that I never imagined that something dark was going on underneath this house. When I got here, she had just given birth to her baby. She told me that she needed more hands, and she wants a girl who would stay with her for a long time. A girl named Ngozi was working with them before I got here. She's a down-to-earth young lady who did everything satisfactorily. She taught me everything about cleaning a home like a professional. At that time, I thought I'd seen my destiny helper, and I never imagined their level of cruelty because of how much people they help in this community. You see, Mr. and Mrs. Bello got their wealth from the devil, and they have to renew the ritual every year by sacrificing a virgin. Did you notice that the first question Mrs. Bello asked is if you're a virgin and you're also taken to a doctor for confirmation? Well, that's because they need a virgin for the ritual, and they can't afford to make mistakes. They've been doing this for years and no one has suspected them because of their charming nature, and they target only poor families. Ada opened her mouth in shock as everything began to make sense. The ghost's face came into focus and Ada saw the pain etched into her features and the desperation in her eyes. They take young girls, she continued, her voice trembling. Girls like us, virgins. They use them in their rituals. For power, for wealth. I was the last one, but there were many before me. Ada's mind reeled, her heart pounding as the ghost explained the terrible truth. The couple she worked for, renowned in the community for their generosity and kindness, was secretly hiding a dark, horrifying secret. Beneath the house, there was a tunnel, a hidden chamber where they performed their rituals, sacrificing the lives of the girls they employed. I found out about the hidden tunnel when the couple forgot to lock the door that leads down there. I've had my suspicions for days after Ngozi got missing. I knew something wasn't right because we went to bed together that night. I didn't know that we were both drugged when she gave us a fruit juice that night to commend us for our hard work. The next day, she reported a missing persons case at the station. They lied that she had eloped with a man when they were the one who killed her and cut her life short. They went to her parents and months later, they gave them a huge amount of money for them to forget about the case. Ngozi's parents did not know about this. They only thought that the Bellos were only being generous to them. So, when I stumbled upon the door that day, I went through all the rooms in the tunnel and I found different fetish items. I also found Ngozi's favourite shoe in the room, which came as a huge shock to me. I didn't know what to do. I tried to run away, but what I didn't know was that they have a camera in the tunnel and they had seen me. That night, Mrs. Bello locked all the house and together with her husband, they dragged me to the tunnel and killed me. I have been restless and roaming around the house ever since then, but somehow they got a charm to keep me away and prevent them from hearing me. So, you're my only hope and the only reason to expose their evil acts. I need you to stop them, the ghost pleaded. They can't continue. You're the only one who can help. The ghost showed Ada the door to the tunnel and she told her to be careful. Ada decided not to do anything when the Bellos are around since they have a camera. She decided to wait for them to go on their usual monthly weekend trip before attempting to do anything. As she slept that night, the vision of the tunnel appeared vividly in Ada's mind, filled with gruesome artifacts, fetish objects, strange symbols, and shallow graves. The girls who had been taken before her, their lives snuffed out to fuel the couple's greed, haunted her thoughts. The next morning, Ada pretended like everything was fine. She did everything to avoid drawing attention towards her, or make the Bellos grow suspicious of her. Ada kept communicating with the ghost as she waited patiently for the weekend, when the couple and their kids will be out of the house. But something strange happened on the day the couple were supposed to travel. Mrs. Bello woke Ada up and surprised her with a few new clothes and shoes, and she told her that she'd be going with them on their monthly trip. According to Mrs. Bello, Ada is one of the best girls she's ever employed, and she's decided to adopt her and make her family. The family made her day and did everything to make her happy. As Ada danced and enjoyed the little party organized for her, she kept seeing different girls in different attires walking around the sitting room, dancing and celebrating like her. She quickly excused herself and locked herself in her room. After catching her breath, the ghost explained to Ada that the party is like a send-off which is usually done for the girls before being sacrificed. It's part of the plan to make the girls happy as they lay down their lives to make them have more wealth and long life. Ada became uneasy at this point. She was very scared. But the ghost told her to find a way to get out of that house or she'd end up like the other girls. Ada shed a tear, unsure of what to do. She thought of what would happen to her parents when they find out she's dead. She knows her parents might also die as a result. So she began to think of what to do. If I leave now, that means this couple would continue this evil act. Ada sighed amidst sobs. I have to do something. As Ada paced around the room, a thought occurred to her. What if I destroy the things they use for the ritual? I can burn everything. The ghost replied, You're a smart girl. I think that should work. Ada got out of her room and walked quietly to the kitchen. She took a lighter from the cabinet, and she picked a glass cup pretended to need water as she took a bottle of water from the fridge. Mrs. Bello asked if she was fine, and Ada replied that the wine is making her head spin and she wants to drink water to douse the effect. The Bellows were watching a program with their kids, so they didn't pay much attention to Ada. Ada walked towards the tunnel door. She had made up her mind. She couldn't continue living in fear, knowing the evil that lurked beneath the surface of the Bellows' home. The air down the tunnel was thick, stifling, and the smell of decay made her gag. But Ada didn't turn back. She destroyed everything she could, starting from the symbols, the tools, and the altars to breaking the power that held the dark magic in place. She set everything on fire and ran out through the back door. When the Bellows saw the fire coming from the tunnel, they knew there was a big problem because no one was supposed to touch or break into the secret altar with fire. That same day, Mrs. Bellos's children, who had been perfectly healthy, suddenly went mad. They screamed and thrashed, speaking in a very strange way, their eyes rolling back in their heads. The couple rushed to every doctor and every spiritual healer they could find, but the verdict was the same. There was only one way to save their children. Confess, the prophets said. Confess to your sins, or they will never be free. Under immense pressure, the couple finally broke. They went to the police and confessed to everything: the murders, the rituals, the hidden tunnel, and the countless girls who had died by their hands. The police, shocked by the extent of their crimes, uncovered the shallow graves on a secluded property owned by the couple. The story made headlines, rocking the community. As soon as they confessed, their children regained sanity and lived a normal life. The couple was sentenced to life in prison, their wealth and reputation crumbling to dust. But inside the prison walls, their health began to deteriorate. Without the rituals to sustain them, they grew weak, their bodies wasting away. They died within months, racked with pain and haunted by the spirits of the girls they had killed. Ada, free from the horrors of the house, left the town behind. Though she carried the memories with her, she knew she had done the right thing by stopping the cycle of evil and giving peace to the restless souls. And though she moved on, every now and then, in the quiet moments, she could still feel the ghost's presence, watching over her and thankful for her courage.